The first of 4 format tests has arrived in Overwatch 2. This is the Max 2 5v5 test. If you are unfamiliar with what that is, it just means that you can have up to 2 of the same role, which allows you to now play 2 tanks, 2 supports or 1 DPS, or 2 tanks, 1 support and 2 DPS, etc., etc. You'll always have a 2-2-1 format. It's you're just kind of trying to figure out which one is going to get the short end of the stick, right? That is what this game mode is, and I'm going to be so real with you before I get into this kind of good, bad analysis and also what I want to see from this mode, if this is where they want to go. This will not work without balance changes. And I think they know that. It's just kind of like a mini test right now. It's not one of their bigger ones for 6v6, but without balance changes, I think that this idea is requiring a lot of work, basically. It is not selling me on the idea right now, even with the tank health changes. And just playing it in quick play for 3 days will never tell the entire story. Because there are not going to be things that we know. There's going to be people only playing old stuff that they recognize. You see me, I'm just playing double bubble here. It's going to be hard to find all the combinations and everything. Like, I saw a lot of people just playing Rein Zarya, Rein Zarya, Rein Zarya. But, you know, we're not actually getting the full picture, right? People are just kind of going through their nostalgia trip right now that they have the 2 tanks. And maybe that will open up the 6v6 test to have more variety, because people already tried their old stuff and now they're trying the new stuff later on. Who knows? But I do think that this test is a little flawed, and it's just kind of like a weird experiment. Maybe it's just to figure out not format for queue times, right? It might just be like, is this a test? Do people like this okay enough so that if we were to implement it with balance changes, then we could run this as well? I think that's kind of what this is for. I don't think it's trying to hard change the formula. It's just trying to see how much do people actually like this in its imperfect state, which we'll talk about that. But let's go ahead. Let's go into the good first. Tanks can get punished now. Not to the same degree as they were in Overwatch 1, but it does feel like tanks, you can't just run in willy-nilly all the time, because if you put yourself out of position or you don't have your resource correctly, it's much harder to get bailed out of jail because you have way less health, which I think is a good thing, that I also think could be a good thing for regular 5v5 as well. But that's kind of neither here nor there. That's not really what this is about, but that is a good thing, and we are going to circle back to this one later. But just know that it is good that tanks do have at least a bit more risk involved in their play. Also, if you like tank synergies, if you liked Overwatch 1, you'll probably like this as well, especially if you are a tank player who remembers those days. The tank synergies are all here, and there are plenty of new ones to mess around with as well. They are fun. Of course, it's always fun to when you time everything correctly. When you're throwing your Sig shield so your Hog can walk up and get a free hook. When your Winston jumps in, you bubble him at just the right moments where the whip shot hits it and doesn't knock him away. It does feel very, very satisfying. And people, I'm sure, will like this version as well. And of course, it just makes fast queue times. That is always a good thing. I don't think I had a queue time go over a minute today. Although I was playing with a lot of the same people, so there might have been some kind of like, it might just be making the MMR kind of closer, or not closer, but widening the MMR gap so they could just get games, get as many reps on this as possible. That could be a reason. I don't really see that as being so, but you know, it is nice to just queue and queue and queue. And if this were the main mode, you would only have one rank, and to me that seems it simplifies it a lot. And I'm definitely down for that. Having 3 different ranks to take care of is so weird, to me at least, but obviously there are advantages to it. So, that's what I've got for the objective good. Again, this is talking about this specific test, right? No balance changes, nothing like that, other than the tank health being minimized a little bit, right? So what is the bad? Well, this is still an open queue format. If you get 2 DPS on your team, you will lose, because tanks are Overwatch 2 tanks. They have all the changes that they have in Overwatch 2. They have all the passives that they have in Overwatch 2. Just because they have less health and just because they are a little more punishable does not mean that they still don't have the same, if not just a little less of the power that they have on the live game. And now there's 2 of them. You know what I mean? The tank role in general, every individual tank is a little weaker based on health, but in general, the tank role has gotten significantly stronger because there are 2 of them and they synergize well with each other. It is a really, really hard sell right now with current tank passives and strength and all of that to then be like, okay, well now you have to deal with 2 raid bosses who work extremely well with each other. You know what I mean? It's a really, really tough call to make, I think. Yeah, again, I just wrote down, it just feels like the tank show, right? That being that the other roles are so less powerful in comparison that you put resources all into tanks. You don't get to do much. You have to pick your characters around what tanks you have and what tanks they have. There's not much of that original Overwatch 2 idea of just kind of figuring it out as you go, and just kind of being able to play whatever you want and succeeding in that sense. It feels a lot more restrictive in what you can do when you're playing a DPS or a support. You're going to be seeing me play Juno, and it's not going to happen very often where I get to like hard shoot at the enemy team and like interact with the enemy. I am going to be focusing on keeping my Zarya up and keeping my Wrecking Ball up a lot more. It's going to limit what I can do on these characters because the tanks demand so many more resources. And since they are so powerful, you have to give them those resources. And the same thing with DPS. I mean, DPS just feels like a wet noodle. The role that is around damage, you are supposed to be damaging the enemy, and you are supposed to do the most damage. Just doesn't feel like that when so many ways to mitigate or undo your work are in the game. It is really, really tough to, as a DPS, or even like if you're fighting, like the one DPS on the other team, why would I shoot them? Why would I care about them when there's the 2 supports that are keeping up the tank backline or the tank front line? Oh yeah, and of course the 2 tanks who are running it down at mine. I'd much rather pay attention to those characters than the one DPS who is taking one little angle that doesn't matter as much. And remember, we are when you have 2 tanks, you can play a lot more death volley, especially without one of your DPS. Like, the angle pressure you can have isn't that much, so you might as well put as many chips as possible into that one angle, that one flank that you're on, instead of trying to catch them from all directions like you kind of do in Overwatch 2 more so, right? It's definitely a big difference from what we have been playing recently. I'm just not so sure if I'm sold on it in this department, right? Another thing to know is that even though tanks are super good, some tanks feel incredibly powerful. Like, I think Ramatra feels really good. I think Zarya feels really good when you can double bubble your other tank. That is a really good skill to have. I say skill, but just like a really good resource to have, right? And then other characters feel really bad. I think Mauga feels pretty bad overall. He just takes so much damage, and since there's so much more mitigation, it's harder for him to get cardiacs. His slams are much more risky now. He just does not feel very good, and he can't really deal with the shotgun, or why did I say shotgun? He's a shotgun character effectively, so he can't deal with the flankers or the squishies. He has to deal with the tanks who are supporting each other so hard that he can't really interact with them. Doomfist also in this format feels pretty bad. His health pool being so low and his value comparatively being low as well is a hard sell. It is hard to justify having a Doomfist over like a Diva or something, because he is mainly supposed to be doing DPS, but he doesn't provide anything that the other tanks do. So it's hard to justify having this character. So there would need to be a lot of balance changes for everyone to make it as fun as possible, And with that, I guess it kind of brings up the point of like, the whole thing with Overwatch 2 is that they want you to be able to play as more things as possible. Everyone has more individual agency. But with there being such power disparity, it's going to feel like when somebody on your team picks the wrong thing, or like the wrong tank, or you pick 2 DPS, you only have 1 support, it's just going to feel like we are always going to be playing an uphill battle no matter what, because we don't have the resources to pump into our 2 tanks, or God forbid you don't have 2 tanks and then you're just going to get run over. Your front line is never going to compete with a 2 tank front line. It's going to feel really bad. That is going to be a problem, right? Like, the role lock solution is that you're always going to have somewhat playable games where games are going to feel closer together and the game gets a little more homogenized, but at the same point you don't have these extremely low points of, well, my team just doesn't function well because we don't have the right stuff. And OpenQ opens it up a little more to where you're going to have some of these frustrations and somebody is going to pick solo Zen as your healer, and that's going to suck. Now, you can swap to something else, like that is the point, right? But, you know, if I'm playing tank and we have 2 tanks, like, I can't swap off tank. I have to play tank because tanks are so powerful. It's, you know, it's this big rabbit hole, of course, that I can just go on and on about. But I think it is a problem. It's something that we do need to talk about overall. Also, poke comps just felt super weird since Orisa doesn't quite exist like she used to. There weren't great choices for poke. You have Sigma, obviously, but then you're playing like Wrecking Ball and Roadhog, I guess. Ori does have that, what's it called? That range, but her abilities are much closer range. They don't play for regular poke. Honestly, that is just those are just the list of things that I could come up with for negatives in that amount of time. I'm sure that there are much more, and I've only played about a couple of hours on it so far, and it will be gone before we even know it. But I do want to say, what do I want to see from this mode in particular? Not the Kingmaker. You know, Kingmaker is coming. It's going to have like the buffed up version of the solo character. We'll have to see what that actually looks like. But if it were in 5e Max 2, what do I want to see, right? Well, I think for the most part, tank headshot reduction needs to go completely away. The other passives, I don't really care about as much, but you know, tank survivability should go down across the board. Even though I know it's easier to punish tanks, I still think there needs to be a little more done in that department. I also think that tank health or / armor needs to get hit even more, or they need to take a look at every single individual tank and look at their survivability and make sure it's not that high. And also they need to look at their peel potential, because D.Va has a longer matrix. Zarya can double bubble the tank. The other tank. She can double bubble the other tank. I cannot stress enough how silly I think that is. Even though there is a bit of a cooldown, right? All the tanks are buffed up to be viable solo. So we need to take a look at the rest of their tools. That is going to be a really important factor here. That is really a really big thing, right? Because Roadhog, you know, I was taking a lot of damage this game. I wasn't dying a lot on Roadhog, but I was taking a lot of damage, but I was still able to survive and still able to survive and still able to survive because of the changes that he got. So we need to take a look at some of these changes that have been made for Overwatch 2 solo tanking, because they not only make the double tank experience feel frustrating in some regards, but they also confound on each other because they work so well together. Also, for DPS, either they all need individual buffs to make them worthwhile, or maybe we just make the if we're assuming role passives exist still in general, although I wouldn't be surprised if we got rid of some of them, because they benefit the tanks the most. So if you got rid of everybody's, it wouldn't matter as much. But I think that if role passives are going to exist, the DPS role passive needs to do the full amount to tanks again. That would also reduce their survivability to make it harder to play. But I am going on about survivability a lot. That isn't really the main issue so much, right? I mean, the health pools are down, and survivability I think is still a little high. But the main issue, I think, is just what the tanks are allowed to do. Their kits in general have gotten so much better, and having two of them at once is really frustrating and somewhat uninteractive at times. You know, I was playing a lot of tank, and I could just feel it about how effective. Wow, what a miss! How effective it was against, especially like squishies. It's just there's nothing you can do with some of these characters. So that's it. That's my little yap session about this. I just feel like this test has really not gotten its due. I know the 6v6 test is going to come with balance changes and probably be a little more involved, but what is the point of testing this when you're not going to give it kind of like its light of day? Is this just going to replace open queue? Are we gonna not have full open queue? Is this trying to be what's it called? Are they trying to fix this for the live game, the main game? I don't know. I am a little confused about it. I'm a little concerned about the direction of this one, because I don't think it's a terrible idea on paper, especially for solving queue times, especially for the 6v6 tests later on. That might be the queue time solution that we really needed. But yeah, I don't know. Like it just seems a little half-baked in this 5v5 effort. So that is what I have to say about this. I'm going to be playing it a little more. Maybe I'll update my thoughts before this video actually goes live, but for right now, I am definitely not sold on this variant as it stands during the test, but I do see the potential. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe if you have not already. This, and like the video while you're at it. Comment, what do you think about this format? Which formats are you looking forward to in the future? I'd love to hear back from you. Also, this was streamed live, twitch.tv/LaneHemingway. That's Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And if you want 3 free months to my Twitch, that is going to be a giveaway in my Discord. You have to correctly predict the Game of the Year nominees. Those are going to be closing very soon. I expect that those are going to be announced next week. So when they are announced, the voting or the poll will end. So please get yours in as soon as possible. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please have a good day.